Alright guys, today we're going to take a look at my training model. I have it broken down into 6 different buckets, as well as a folder for how I track basically all client needs. I also have physiology and then just other types of program models down at the bottom as a reference for things. So to kick things off with training principles, just overarching principles as you can see down at the bottom, I guess basic, then principles for hypertrophy, principles for strength, endurance, speed, athleticism. So I'll just run through my basic principles for now. What is training? A repeated intentional physical effort to elicit structural and functional adaptations towards a goal. Principles, my overarching guidepost or lighthouse. Seek to best replicate the qualities you want to be able to express. So if you want to be strong, then do whatever it takes to set yourself up to be as successful at demonstrating something strong as you possibly can. So set yourself up for success. Another one would be increase from a minimum effective dose to a maximal recoverable volume for desired quality. Maintain minimal sustainable volume during other blocks of training. Another principle would be time and place to acquire movement options, time and place to run from a bear. Early and often success, building to that expression of fitness. So this kind of goes hand in hand. The time and place would be more along the lines of what positions we would kind of need to acquire based on the person's goals, and then time to run from bear would be the intensity or expression of that sport, goal, or fitness quality, whatever that may be. Whereas early and often success is just whatever training we're going through right now, whatever skill, whatever they're learning, developing, the more early and often I can make them feel successful. One, it's re-encouraging to continue the program. And then 2, it's just going to reinforce the important details along the way. High intensity should be targeted at most essential qualities. So making sure that you're spending your highest efforts on your biggest return on investment towards your goal. And then, of course, your specificity, overload, individual difference, and reversibility. So after that, we have client considerations. This would kind of be just a blanket form. My tracking for this in general consults is much more thorough. But overarching, I need to know your goals. Client's attention span, that's more so on like a day-to-day basis, and that's kind of knowing your audience. Age, training age, interest in reaching goals. Obstacles is that time, motivation, discipline, knowledge, intimidation, kind of lifestyle constraints. Any concerns about training, other activities you partake in, and then what does a client actually think the coach is there for? I usually find this as a valuable tool during my consults to kind of know where my starting place is at the very minimum, so I can meet them where they are and kind of what they expect out of me. After that, we have our programming considerations. So this is essentially different models I've pulled from. So this would be Dr. Pat's Rethinking the Big Patterns model, or at least his principles progression, his measures, and then list of movement patterns. The energy system is a model I've pulled from Evan Peikon. The speed preservation test is also the same, pulled from Evan Peikon. Propulsion arc this is just an example of walking from kind of a top-down perspective, and helps me conceptualize Bill Hartman's propulsion arc, which I'm still adding to as well to actually get the arc in here. OPEX time domains. OPEX is more of a CrossFit certification acronym guy. But anyways, they have pretty decent reference for general time domains, recoverability between like blocks and training periods. So I kind of use this as a reference for acceptable range of sets per given intensity or duration of work bouts. And then critical power, this is also from Evan Peikon. So I'm not the best with math, but this does a pretty good job of essentially calculating what the cost of increased duration is for your ability to output power, or wattage in this case. So we have the durations. So essentially I'd get a max or an average watts for a 60-second duration. You'd give me max effort. I'd get max effort average watts for 90-second, 150-second. And then I recently added the 480-second. So you could do it with just 3 numbers. But you get the average watts you're able to sustain, and it does the math to figure out what it's costing you. And then you can essentially get a theoretical time in mind. So it's being 20 minutes. It's assuming I can hold 206 watts for 20 minutes. Or if I put this to 10 minutes, it's saying I can hold 240 watts, essentially. Similarly, I can also put in a theoretical wattage, so I can hold 600 watts for 93 seconds based off these numbers. So it can be pretty useful, just for one, if I put in these numbers and they're at least accurate, then any deviation from that I can assume is a functional adaptation to training that occurred somewhere. So I can already see improvements based off of what should be numbers, and then I can put in those new durations, and it just makes this more accurate. So it's just a useful tool to kind of take some of the guesswork off of me. And similarly, the speed preservation test from Evan, this allows me to better interpret our energy system model. So speed preservation test, if you get a 5K PR, a 3K, 2K, 1K PR on a rower in these numbers example, then essentially we can calculate, kind of figure out where you are in reference to what a lot of other athletes have been given limitation reference for. Sorry, that was a little bit of word vomit. But essentially, we have enough data on rowers to be able to understand that they're delivery limited, respiratory limited, or utilization limited based on where they fall on this graph. So after we do the math, it'll give me relative percentage. So it'd kind of be like that, or something like that. So, for example, there you go. So we'd call them delivery limited. So their ability to actually deliver oxygen to the working tissue over a long duration of time. You could also think of this as like the oxidative pathway. And this could occur for a number of reasons. One example would be, one, they have so much muscle mass that under earlier percentages of load, they start to occlude blood flow back to the heart. So potentially losing muscle mass or increasing capillary density of the given tissues at work here could be of benefit. So another way of putting this is more cardio type training, and certain protocols would be low effort, steady state distance, or potentially starting at a much below threshold pace, increasing to threshold or higher throughout a given activity. So like a 2K row starting at a 5K, increase into a 1K pace throughout. And this way you're still able to deliver oxygen to the working tissues for a long duration of the time, and then you're still going to have a higher average output than if you were just doing a low effort steady state. So essentially training protocols probably won't differ a whole lot. That was just like a given example. But it does, again, take some of the guesswork off me. So if I can get some of these numbers, essentially, and again, I work with mostly CrossFit athletes, so having row numbers can be useful for me, then it just makes it a little bit easier to know if, well, you need to put on muscle, or know your ability to uptake oxygen or let off CO2 sucks, or know your ability to deliver oxygen to the working tissues over long durations sucks. So yeah. And again, that brings us to the energy system, as Evan iterates, is all oxidative, so everything is always lactic, everything is always oxidative. So under these circumstances, it's more of a spectrum. So for the sake of understanding kind of a threshold, that's where we're able to deliver oxygen at the same rate that it's being consumed by the muscle. So this kind of gives us a spectrum. So compressive reaction activities, this would kind of be like running or biking at like a below threshold pace. So it's likely 30% or less of your 1 RM for the muscles at play here. And a compressive reaction just allows for almost a second heart type activity. So your muscles are helping to return blood flow back to the heart with their given tension or pressure. Generally from 30 to 70%, we can start to have venous occlusion, just meaning that the muscle is creating enough tension that it is occluding or stopping blood flow back to the heart. And then under really heavy loads, so 70% to a 1 RM, we would see an arterial occlusion, so the muscle has created so much tension that blood can't even get into the heart. So both of these would essentially be above a threshold, because if you're occluding blood flow, you are reducing stroke volume and thus cardiac output, and thus you are losing oxygen over the course of this activity. And if oxygen drops to a 0, you are at a failing point. So what the range does for us is 2 examples. Maybe we have like a power lifter and then a marathoner. So the power lifter, they will likely occlude blood flow, both venous and arterial, on a much lower end of this spectrum. Whereas, say, a marathon runner could probably get away with like 40 to maybe even 60% of their 1RM before they occlude blood flow. This also gives us an ability to kind of gauge hypertrophy training a little better. So if hypertrophy is going to take place under mechanical or muscle tension, it's also going to have a pooling of blood within the given muscle and a low oxygen saturation, which will also be representative of a minimal reps and reserve, so or 5 and less. To just kind of give a good gauge, if so the marathon runner, clearly they have well-trained aerobic capacity within their legs. So let's say a high capillary density, high mitochondrial density. So their ability to get higher on this chain before they occlude blood flow is going to be much higher in their lower body than their upper body. So in their upper body, they'll likely put on or have a similar occlusion effect at a lower percentage than, say, their lower body would have. So for their lower body to actually hypertrophy, they're going to have to get much closer to their 1RMs to actually get that sort of response. Whereas for their upper body, it would be a much lower percentage of their 1RMs to get any sort of effective dose for them. So again, just allows you to manage fatigue and kind of know at what point are we passing threshold or capacity to deliver oxygen to the working tissues and utilize that to complete the given task. And then event limitations, so task is going to dictate the position that you got to be in, and then however you're able to function in that. So let's say, for example, we have like a power lifter going on a long run, 20 minutes, we'll say, for example. Maybe they don't actually have the range of motion necessary to allow for this compression reaction to take place. So this would be a level of athleticism or competency in the movement that they lack, to the extent that the muscles in play or certain muscles are not able to actually eccentrically orientate during the activity, essentially not allowing the muscle to get continuous blood flow or delivering of oxygen to the muscle. So essentially what happens here is we would see a decrease in muscle oxygen saturation down to a low point, maybe over the course of 2 to 3 minutes, and then it would probably stay at a low point for the duration of their run. So even if it was at like a recovery pace, just because it is a event or position limitation for this individual, this could actually be an extremely stressful and demanding and fatigue-inducing 20 minutes for them, even though it may have felt like a recovery pace. So knowing what task they can accomplish with competency will go a long way in your ability to actually get the return on investment or adaptations you're looking for out of the training. System trends for managing energetic and event limitations, so your global compensations. This is more along the lines of like CrossFitters, I perceive. So kind of like in the example sprinters that Pat gave, he was looking for somebody that could sprint and use their phosphagen creatine system for the duration of the entire 100-meter sprint. So like the global compensation would be that transition from PCR utilization to glycogen utilization. And if there is a event limitation, so maybe because of the energetic limitation, there could also be like a change to the way they are functioning, thus a decrease in form or competency throughout. So that just kind of addresses, I guess, fatigue under varying intensities. So to Pat's model, this allows me a tracking method so I can figure out how much volume different movement patterns are occurring over the course of a program, and it just gives me an idea of what intensities, durations, or loads I should be using during any given program for the sake of what I'm trying to accomplish with it. And then as well as the principles progression, so I know how to progress or regress any given skill and what the competency in those given movements would be. And then this paragraph is my own, just kind of how I paraphrased everything. Start by holding a position with congruent sides and most of your body in contact with a solid surface while staying close to your center of gravity, progressively building frequency and extending away from self as we remove constraints and references while maintaining competency in the position. So that covers my program considerations. After that, I just wanted to jot down the essential aerobic and anaerobic structural adaptations that we would actually see from training. And then functional qualities, this would be the actual expression or function of fitness. So I'm just going to be elaborating on the strength-speed spectrum, what endurance looks like, and then just general formulas along the lines of training. And then recovery, this is more or less how I or my philosophy is on recovery. So healthy habits, implementing a daily routine that shapes an environment to produce the best you. Don't be the inevitable product of an environment that happens to you, happen to your environment. So what I mean by that is we should always be trying to the best of our ability, build an environment or an ecosystem that would most accurately require the specimen that we want to be, or the abilities that that specimen would have. So the more we can shape our entire ecosystem to produce this product that is our goal, the more accurate our recovery or our training is. So habits that are potentially worth tracking, nutrition, calorie intake should meet training demands, potential practices for certain people, some work, some effort, and then useful apps that can help you like track certain things. Just kind of gives me an easy way to categorize all that. And then as far as tracking, I'll be quick with this, but we have our character profile. So this essentially is just my consultation form. Lets me know about the client and how I can best serve them and what they're looking for out of a coach. Weekly observations. If I find it necessary or if they're interested, they can utilize a week log to kind of better get a snapshot of what a week in their life looks like and the potential impact of these resources being there or not, or the quality of them. Movement assessment, if the individual is interested or I deem necessary, we would go through a movement assessment, just helping us identify limiting factors, essentially our general tabletop assessment, and I'll use a PRI approach. Copy of profile stats, so this is just tons of different measures. Generally, I work with CrossFitters, so like they want to know all things, so I would end up trying to fill in this as best I could, what our goal is, and then over our evaluations, and then just a cheat sheet of what their training schedule looks like, so I know kind of their training days per week, helps me out with programming and stuff. And then programming tracking, so this is 1, this is 2, I'm just going to show you this one. 10, progressive overload, 12, 15, 18, sure, over 4 weeks we went from 10 to 18. And total weight moved, again, generic number, 100 pounds, 150, 200, 250. Alright, so I put in a bunch of generic numbers for everything, but as you can see, it will essentially tell me how many sets have occurred throughout the week, and then it'll tell me total number of sets per movement category. And then at the bottom, at the end of 4 weeks, I can see during a 4-week training model, we had 55 sets of hip dominant activities and 56 sets of vertical push and 55 sets of triple extension. Similarly, we can also see total weight moved. Again, total sets throughout the entire training block. We can also see total weight moved, so week 1, 500 pounds, 660 on week 2, 900 on week 3, 1120 on week 4, and then again, program total moved 3,180 pounds. So it just gives me an opportunity to accurately check, and then I can see if more of my duration of activities was in long duration or low duration, moderate or low duration. So again, just gives me more tools to kind of accurately see. I wrote a model for this intention. Is that actually what the numbers are showing it is intended to do? So yeah, anyways, thanks y'all for listening, and hopefully that was entertaining or useful to some extent, and I look forward to any and all critique. So thank y'all, happy whatever day of the week it is for you, and good luck and enjoy the ride.
Goodbye.